and I am back. Welcome to the Sumi Sachan podcast, the pod that you can listen anytime at any mood. I made an audiobook on Shoe Dog, but my apologies for not finishing it. But here I am again talking about 10 lessons I learned from Nike's founder. And here it goes. Let's start with 3 kick-ass quotes from Phil Knight, co-founder of Nike. Seek a calling. Even if you don't know what it means, seek it. If you are following your calling, the fatigue will be easier to bear, the disappointment will be few. The highs will be like nothing you have ever felt. It's just business. It's never just business. It will never be. If it ever does become just business, that means that business is very bad. Because mothers are our first coaches. So the first lesson is a love of athletics and finance. Phil has a clear and dedicated passion for athletics. He ran and he raced. His former coach and mentor turned out to be his chief innovator, Bill Bowerman. As a senior athletic coach, Bowerman also brought early athletics credibility to the startup that was Blue Ribbon, the precursor to Nike. Phil's strength were finance and hiring unconventional talent who were both super smart and fiercely loyal. He was quietly incredibly determined, and you get a sense that his launch team were great negotiators. This was key because Blue Ribbon needed lots of partnerships to grow from finance to factories. Lesson number 2. Not that much innovation, but 2 big ones. When I think of Nike, I think of endless innovation, mainly product focused. Phil Knight started with a simple synthetic running shoe before jogging was a thing in the 1960s. Sometimes innovation is just about finding the right wave and riding it. That's it. I only saw a couple of groundbreaking innovations in the early days of Nike, the waffle shoe and Air concept. What you do see is a constant iteration. Sometimes we forget that innovation isn't always about breakthrough, but just constant evolution. And then one day, you look at version 1 and version 9 to see revolution. This is Carole to software digital innovation. Lesson number 3. Relentless execution. Not flawless though. In the early days, there was a huge focus on supply chain, team, and financial management. I think this is still critical. This is the Nike infrastructure that underpins the CX that they are famous for. I remember reading how cash flow challenges almost killed Blue Ribbon a few times in the early days. I am no finance guru, but you see how mega success, that is huge consumer demand, can destroy a company that looks like a unicorn on paper when the financial choreography isn't right. Phil's accounting training coupled with a leadership team skill in both detailed project management and negotiation saved Blue Ribbon / Nike's bacon on a few occasions. If you are shipping product, then supply chain and cash flow remain queen and king. Lesson number 4. A global mindset from day one. Knight saw the globe as his market from the get-go. His early travelers gave him empathy with Japan, and that's where he did his first big deal with a Japanese manufacturer to supply shoes. It tells me that leaders with global experience and insight are key, even if the first step is local country focus and growth. Lesson number 5. Grit. Enough said. Grit. Shitloads of grit to keep going and overcome diversity on what felt like an almost daily basis through the 70s. That's why I love the quote about having a calling. An almost superhuman resilience comes from having a calling. Something that is much bigger than you and much, much bigger than money. Lesson number 6. You don't have to be a jock to work at Nike. At least back then. What super insightful is that the launch or build or scale team were not all personally connected to the vision through athletics. Some of the team were far from athletic, but they probably would have taken bullets for each other. Definitely corporate bullets, if not real ones. I just expected the founding slash early team to be runners or athletic types. Phil Knight was a good athlete but not a great one. His relationship with sports coach Bowerman was key, but half of the management carried some physical limitations and were far from athletics. They all believed in Phil without question and the vision of the company. I think that was enough for Blue Ribbon slash Nike. Personally, I believe all founders and early employees need some meaningful connection with the problem they are solving. Lesson number 7: Business as war without bullets. Phil Knight loved reading about war and saw business as war without bullets. Not sure how well that sits with modern business thinking. Knight was a real art of war type of founder. I think he reveled in both warlike strategies and tactics. It was particularly key when they were once hit by a 25 million tax bill allegedly dreamt up by competitors. For Knight, business is battle. Lesson number 8: An annual company retreat to trash out the issues. Butt faces. The annual retreat where the big issues were thrashed out through a day and night, a space for new recruits and old ones to cut loose. Every company I have worked in had an annual conference, but the Blue Ribbon sessions were pretty full on and engaging. I love the idea of creating a large sandbox for every employee to have a truly authentic say. Or in the Blue Ribbon slash Nike case, a full blown argument. The best startups have to brutally honest or they die. This is even more important and much harder as you scale. Trust and openness, now more than ever. Lesson number 9: Brand status is earned and not built by advertising. Back then, Phil Knight clearly didn't believe in advertising in the first 15 years. Ads were a practical necessity rather than an engine of growth. Even the shift from the company called Blue Ribbon to the one called Nike was a part luck, or you can call part pressure. Although the story about the Greek goddess of victory Nike goes back a few years, so perhaps the idea was lying dormant. It does link to Phil's global view of the world, both in terms of history and geography. Although the story about the Greek goddess of victory goes back a few years, so perhaps the idea was lying dormant. It does link to Phil's global view of the world, both in terms of history and geography. To this day, I believe many a brand and product can derive a positioning from Greek or Roman heritage. When you think about the Nike brand, there are only 2 or 3 major references to advertising in the book. Anyone who grew up in the 90s or 20s would recognize Nike for its iconic brand-led advertising. I think Phil Knight subscribed to the Tim Doyle, co-founder of Eucalyptus Australia Health scale-up, notion of brand status being earned and not built through advertising. Was there a cultural tipping point after 20s when the scale of Nike's athletes allowed for powerful brand stories to be told? Stories that often just amplified the connection between athlete and product that delivered victory. Perhaps the most iconic moment came when Nike Air and Michael Jordan partnered. My take is that Nike started to build an attitude and tone of voice quite early. See this from 1988, just that the CEO didn't care too much for the work back then, except when it linked to a key event like the Olympics and helped sign up more athletes and partners. I studied Nike's digital innovation strategy last decade during my time at Philips around 2013. We examined their partnership with Apple, Nike Plus in the early days, and their first connected products back in 2013. Did they go back to building customer acquisition and retention through digital products and become less reliant on brand advertising? Yes, you definitely saw a shift to using a product and especially software to build community and connection. There was a change back then that great advertising amplified great product. The exception then and now continues to be the big sporting event. Did software become the new product fabric? Pun intended, in the Nike's culture? Lesson number 10: Product first. Always. Knight was all about the product. and using supply chain to get into the hands of consumers. Blue Ribbon was always experimenting via Bill Bowerman and trying to evolve product working with Japanese manufacturers. What Knight learned from Bowerman was to constantly experiment. Bowerman even tried a shoe made from fish. Not sure about how that, but the mindset of learning is relentless. Different materials, different tongues, and of course, different soles and different cushioning. And this was just in the 60s and 70s. For Knight, the goal was to perfect the product with constant tweaks. Bowerman taught him that athletics is about the seconds and the micro improvements. These often made the difference between winning and losing. Start to increment the small improvement and you saw the big change. Again, a big lesson for innovators. What goes through my head is how the Phil Knight vision and his incredible journey with a band of brothers translated into the Nike business and culture post 2000. Shoe Dog in a nutshell: belief, one man's passion for athletics, a dedicated team, a razor-sharp supply chain, astute financial management, and personal sacrifice. That got Blue Ribbon/Nike from the 1960s through 2000. This notion that you build your reputation by the impact you make before the stories that you tell. For Nike, it all started and finished with product and then created the springboard for brand. The big brand plays came a little later. Phil Knight would love to do it all again. The question is, what would be the same and what would be different? I'd love to hear the perspective of Nike people, especially those in the 90s as well as more recent. I'll nudge the ones I know. So stay tuned for the next podcast. Don't forget to like, comment and share. See you. Bye-bye.